In 2024, Venice did something no living city had ever done before. Something so radical that most people who heard about it assumed they had misunderstood. The city installed turnstiles at its entry points and began charging visitors money to walk into the city. Not even a museum or their famous gondolas. Venice called it a solution. In reality, it was the moment they admitted what it had become and why everyone calls Venice the sinking city for a reason. Venice has a new problem, not the one that filled 1,000 think pieces, prompted emergency municipal sessions, and inspired protest banners hung from palazzo windows. That problem, everyone understood. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a solution. The solutions arrived, one after another, across 15 years of very serious meetings. And somewhere in the implementation, something went wrong. Not loudly, not in a way that generated its own think pieces, quietly, and in exactly the direction no one was watching. The entry fee system, introduced in the spring of 2024, was called a groundbreaking experiment in sustainable tourism management. The logic was simple. Charge a €5 fee on peak days, reduce the volume of day trippers, and use the revenue to maintain the city's infrastructure. Economists praised it. Mayors from Amsterdam to Barcelona sent delegations to observe. The Financial Times ran an approving leader column. What the approving leader column did not examine was what the fee actually selected for. The day tripper who arrives at Santa Lucia at 9 in the morning takes photographs at Rialto, eats a sandwich from a paper bag because the restaurants are too expensive, and leaves before dark does not disappear when you charge €5. €5 is nothing to the budget that funds a return train ticket from Milan and a new camera lens. What the fee actually does is introduce a layer of procedural friction that disproportionately affects a very specific kind of visitor. The kind who arrives without a firm plan, who is considering a few days in Venice because a friend mentioned it, because they were passing through, because they had not been, and thought this might be the year. That visitor encounters the gate, the app, the sign in 4 languages, and recalibrates. Not because of the money, because of what the gate communicates. This is a managed site. Prepare accordingly. A tourism researcher at a university in northern Italy, who has been tracking visitor behavior in the northeastern region for the better part of a decade, described the shift using language that was careful and, for that reason, more alarming than if she had been careless with it. She said the fee did not change the number of visitors significantly, not in the first year. What it changed was the composition. The spontaneous visitor, the person for whom Venice was an impulse rather than an itinerary, largely disappeared from the data. What remained was the planned visitor, the group tour, the cruise ship substitute, the person who arrives with a checklist and leaves when the checklist is complete. Venice did not get fewer tourists. It got worse ones. There is a distinction that the city's tourism management apparatus has never been fully comfortable making, because making it honestly requires acknowledging something uncomfortable. Not all tourists are equivalent. The visitor who spends 3 days getting lost in Castello, who eats at the place the owner of their pensione recommended, who buys a glass object from an actual Venetian glassblower and understands what they are paying for. That visitor is not economically identical to the visitor who walks the Piazza San Marco in 90 minutes and leaves. They are different categories of economic activity. They are also different categories of human experience. The city needs one. It has optimized itself for the other. This is not a new observation, but what is new is that the intervention designed to fix it made it worse. Consider what the entry fee communicates to the premium traveler, the person with disposable income, and the option of going somewhere else. It communicates that Venice is a bounded attraction, a place with gates and fees and queues. That is fine if you are managing access to a theme park. It is catastrophic if you are trying to maintain the fiction, and it is a necessary fiction, that Venice is a city. Cities do not charge you to enter. Heritage sites do. The moment Venice accepted the logic of the entry fee, it conceded the argument about what it fundamentally is. And that concession has consequences that €5 per visitor will never be able to fund. The numbers from the seasons following the fee's introduction are instructive in a way that requires careful reading. Total visitor volume remained broadly stable. That was the headline figure, and it was used to declare the experiment a success. But hotel occupancy in the 3 and 4 star segment, the segment that captures the medium-stay visitor who represents meaningful economic engagement with the city's actual commerce, softened measurably. Average length of stay continued a decline that had been underway for several years. And repeat visitor numbers, the category that every tourism economist watches most carefully because it measures genuine attachment to a destination, fell. The people who had been before and thought about coming back looked at the new apparatus, the gates, the apps, the designated queuing zones, the stewards in high-visibility vests, and a certain percentage of them decided to go somewhere else instead. Not because they could not afford it, because the city they remembered was not the city being advertised. A former hotel director who managed a property on the Zaatare for nearly 15 years described a conversation with a repeat guest who had stayed at the hotel 7 times across 2 decades. The guest, a German academic in his early 60s, sent an email explaining that he would not be returning. He did not say anything dramatic. He said that Venice had begun to feel administered, that the thing he had come for, the quality of being inside something ancient and unmanaged and slightly overwhelming, had been organized out of existence. Administered. That word is worth sitting with. Because the history of cities that have tried to manage their way out of decline through bureaucratic intervention is not an encouraging one. The intervention tends to address the visible symptom while accelerating the underlying condition. Medieval London installed plague doctors. It did not stop the plague. The intervention is not nothing, but it is also not the thing that would actually help. What would actually help in Venice is not a €5 fee. What would help is 30,000 Venetians moving back into the historic center. Functioning schools, a supermarket that sells groceries rather than truffle oil for tourists, a bar where people go after work because they live nearby, not because they are doing Venice before dinner. A city, not a simulation of one. That is the version of the problem that the FEE cannot touch. The fee manages the surface. The surface was never the problem. The problem is underneath it, in the demographic hollow where a living city used to be. There is a particular irony in the current situation that Venice would appreciate if Venice were still the kind of place that appreciated irony. The city that spent 50 years complaining about too many tourists has now created a system that keeps the tourists it should want away, while doing almost nothing to deter the tourists it would prefer to lose. The day tripper with a sandwich is undeterred. The thoughtful traveler with a week and money to spend is reconsidering. The problem has not been solved, it has been inverted. And the Venetians who remain, the ones who have watched the committees and the reports and the urban initiatives come and go for 20 years without reversing a single year of population decline, have developed a patience with institutional failure that is almost geological in its depth. They do not expect the fee to help. They never did. They watched it arrive the way you watch a very slow train arrive that you already know is going to the wrong station. The gates are still there. The turnstiles are still operational on peak days. The employees in high-visibility vests are still stationed at the entry points, explaining the app to visitors who arrived spontaneously and are now staring at a sign in 4 languages. Behind them, a city, or something that was recently a city. The distinction is becoming, quietly, academic. Empires do not fall in a day. They fall in patterns. And sometimes the most dangerous pattern is the one that looks, at a distance, exactly like a plan.